Releasing Trauma is sponsored by the Global Association for Trauma Recovery. The Global Association for Trauma Recovery is a social impact organization serving as a resource for survivors and their families, dedicated to facilitating change by spreading trauma-related awareness and thus creating a more trauma-informed world. Learn more at gaftr.org. Welcome to Releasing Trauma, a Survivor's Podcast. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. I am a survivor of emotional bullying, rape, sexual assault, domestic abuse, and grief. After losing my husband in 2019, I set off on a new adventure to help other women release their trauma and create a life they can cherish. Each week, I will feature a guest expert or a survivor to share their stories, tips, wisdom, and more. The goal is so that you can take away even just the smallest nugget of information you can use in your life right now to make a change, and to remind you that you're not alone. There is life after trauma, and you can move from victim to thriver and create a life you can cherish. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I am your host, Tracy Osborne. With me today is Scott Silverman. We are going to talk about something very timely right now as we're coming up on the holiday season, and that is addiction and alcohol and getting through the holidays. So Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Tracy. The stigma around this conversation is so high. It's an honor to be here and appreciate the opportunity to have a few moments to talk about it.
It really is. And that's something that we're trying to help overcome, is that's the stigma around, trauma and abuse and what comes after, being traumatized. So, and we are coming up on the holiday season, and this is generally, I think, that time of year where it gets really hard for people.
I absolutely agree, and learning a little bit about you, doing some research, the term trauma, we in the treatment world use the word, I like the word untreated trauma more, just because there's so much of it out there. And it's just fascinating when you start to work with human beings and realize, because I've been involved with helping others for decades, that the recidivism rate that happens with substance use disorders, the alcohol issue, the self-medication, the behavioral health issues, the mental health issues, the chronic, reoccurrence, the recidivism rate as well, it continues to grow, simply in my opinion, because professionally, and I'm not a clinician, but in the profession, I should say, the need to delve deeper to try to help people with the underlying issues. Because in our industry, running an outpatient substance use disorder treatment center certified by the state of California. And I say all that because I want people to know that, it's just not me talking to people, is the way insurance works. There isn't enough time because you can't really help somebody until you remove the anesthesia, so to speak, or if someone's allergic to or self-medicating, if you will, it's impossible to get to the core issues. And most cases, and we work with a lot of veterans right now. We have a huge veteran track. I say huge, we're a boutique operation, but a lot of veterans, and their untreated PTS is just, once the layer of the onion kind of gets removed, and the need to start talking about some of the deep-rooted issues that are causing some of the trauma, it's amazing how people have survived as long as they have. And, and people wonder, why is the suicide rate so high? Well, dealing with that kind of emotional pain, going untreated, and most people in their best day have a hard time managing.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. And, in the trauma, it goes untreated for years.
Correct.
So it just kind of sits within us and bubbles and brews and, grows inside as we just kind of go through life trying to survive.
Yeah. One of my favorite phrases is pressure bust pipes. And when you think about that, everyone can relate to that. And that's what, these untreated underlying issues that go for so long are. And, it's one of those things. It's not like a broken arm. It's not like accidentally shaving off your eyebrow. You can't see it. You can maybe sense it. You have an idea. You can make some assumptions, but it's not like something that hangs on someone's shoulder and, is a big sign that says, I'm in emotional pain. Please help me. So right. It really requires a deeper dive. It really requires some self-assessment, and more than likely, it's going to require somebody outside of that person to say, let's sit down and talk about it, because you can't really fix it yourself.
No, you can't. It's, this is just, I know that from, a personal standpoint. With my traumas, I thought, well, I don't need professional help. I don't need to talk to anybody. I can just deal with it and everything will be okay. And no, that's not how it works. That is so not how it works.
Yeah. And it's interesting, and I'm sorry for you, for the journey you had to go on, and the fact that you're here today talking about it and helping others really resonates with me, and I think speaks to the kind of resources that we need in our community to really create systemic change. And when you think about veterans and you think about first responders, they're trained to not have these feelings. They're trained to suppress them, keep them down, ignore them, deny them, whatever you want to call it, because their job is to take care of others. And when you're taking care of others, there's no room for self-pity. There's no room for thinking about, oh, woe is me. There's no room for it, because you have a difficult time trying to survive in the environment that you're in. So I've always worked with, first responders since Confidential Recovery opened 8 years ago, and being able to add the veteran track. And, it's interesting, in our community, San Diego, almost 30% of our first responders, law enforcement mostly, are veterans. So there's a double whammy if you think about it, because, right? But it also makes, because of their training in the military, it makes it an easy transition to get into law enforcement. But the problem is, if you haven't dealt with some of the stuff that takes place, being in those worlds, it only gets worse. And, you see some of the things that go on. It's a little scary. So, and we're in this difficult environment now, obviously with COVID, with people in quarantine, and, they've been kind of locked at home. Or they've chosen to be at home, or been told to stay at home, or had no choice. And now we're seeing, significant increases in not only drug overdoses, but also alcohol consumption, marijuana consumption, and, the suicide rate skyrocketing in the entire country. And it's only getting worse. And unfortunately, to be honest with you, Tracy, no one's really talking about it. And when I say nobody, I mean the leadership in our community. They bring it up periodically, but COVID right now, and the way the legislative leaders are bickering amongst themselves to try to make decisions about what we need to do next, we're not getting to some of the issues that are really impacting our communities. I mean, we are getting to some of them, but this particular one right now, for example, 240 people are dying every day in our country behind opioids, prescription medication, and street opioids and counterfeit medication. 240 people. You don't hear about that. And, and that's a plane crash. Tracy, think about it. It's a plane crash. And a lot of those people that are dying are young people who are taking counterfeit medication. They think they're taking this, and they're actually taking that, and they're overdosing and dying, at 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. And families are destroyed forever. And, I, as a crisis coach and a family navigator, I get calls every day, and the bewilderment of the parent is unbelievable. So the fact that we're talking about this is so important. And I hope people will hear the message and make a phone call. I'm going to give them my number. Hope you don't mind. 619-993-2738, 619-993-2738. I give my number out because I really encourage people. I don't care where you are in the world. Call or text me. Scott H. Silverman's my name. You can Google me, email me. Because I know if I get a strange phone number in my phone, Tracy, it could be somebody that I could help. And, it doesn't matter where you live in the country. I can help you make some sound decisions, where to navigate, what areas to call, where to look on the, on the internet if you need that kind of help, and just hold your hand for a little bit and just give you some support, and know that, a little bit of navigation goes a long way. Because when you think about it, as a parent, no one was ever trained to deal with this kind of thing, let alone trauma, mental health issues, unless you're in the field. And even if you're in the field, I just met with a family, and both of the parents are professionals. One was a psychiatrist or medical director, I think a psychologist, and the significant other mom was a nurse. And they had issues because this disease of addiction that doesn't discriminate, and it's hard to help the one you love.
Absolutely. It goes along with, why doctors aren't allowed to operate on family members, there's that emotional tie. It's hard to be objective and see from the outside because you're clouded.
Yeah. That's a great example. I'm going to use that. I never really put the two together, but you're right. Doctors don't work on their families and dentists don't work on their,
Yeah.
It's kind of like, whenever my wife and I try to do something together, sometimes it's like, we shouldn't be doing this without a mediator or a coach or a navigator, especially in quarantine, because we both work from home and, we've been married a long time, be 40 years coming up in March. And, all of a sudden 2 people are brought together under a circumstance it's unseen. And what's fascinating, and I'm sure you're seeing this, Tracy, in your work, there aren't a lot of people out there. I don't care what level of school you have or academia or college education or professional, clinical or medical. No one has ever dealt with this kind of crisis. The COVID, I'm talking about the quarantines.
Well, yeah, no, we've never.
No one's ever had this. I don't care if you're a political person, no matter what side of the party you're on, legislative leaders, community-based leaders, thought leaders, faith-based, it doesn't matter. No one on the planet has ever experienced this before, to be able to say to somebody else, here's what we need to do. I mean, there may be suggestions and things we could do together, but as a group and as a community, we've never seen anything like this. So I think that it's important to keep our hearts open, our minds open, our ears open, and be ready to listen and to really actually hear and talk. And that's one of the things I talk about during the holidays for families is people are going to get together for the first time in a long time. Kids have been to school, they're coming home again. It's important for families to listen to each other. Set your phone down for a little while, not long, put it in a basket, hide it, see what happens. Watch the kids go through their physical withdrawal, setting their phones down. Internet addiction is a big one as well. And listen to each other. Talk to each other. Just say, how are you feeling? And instead of putting words in their mouth, I like the term, shut up. Listen to your children, listen to each other, and then empower them to listen to you. I mean, I look at my kids. I mean, obviously they're my children in their 30s, but, we just had a kind of a come to Jesus meeting about a year ago, and we sat around the table and we all agreed on the ground rules, and we all gave each other thoughts and feedback and ideas and support. And it was kind of rough for me because I felt like, they were picking on me. But after I processed it, I realized, it all came from the right spot. It came from the heart. Yeah. And, I'm a pretty good, I like to think of myself as a hostage negotiator, if you will, and mediator, because I've done a lot of it. But it was really healthful, but it was kind of, it hurt at first because when someone's telling you the truth, but you know what? As a family, it really helped us. We got grounded, we got recentered, kind of rebooted and refreshed. And I'm looking forward to Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving is always, November is always a tough month for us because we lost my brother, I lost my folks. It's just weird. November's kind of been I went to treatment in November, but I also got clean and sober in November. So, by the way, I just celebrated, God, it was 37 years this past Saturday of continuous sobriety.
That is awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So anyway, I'm looking forward to the holidays in a way this year, and my phone rings a lot. December's, God, one of the worst months for suicide ever. I'm going on TV on Sunday to talk about, what families can do during the holidays and the simple tips. And a lot of it's just listening to each other and trying to speak from the heart and be ready for it. And if you've got a loved one that's going to be coming home that had an issue when they left and things have gotten worse, what a great time to be a resource for them. But you need to get up to speed. You're going to have to do some research. You're going to have to talk to some experts because this kind of thing, it doesn't happen easily. I mean, as you know, Tracy, your history, in my opinion, but from what little I've read about you, your expertise to help others right now have come out of your own personal experience. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Right. So when you're talking to somebody, you're not approaching it from a book perspective. You're approaching it from a life experience perspective, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and I'm not turning this interview around on you, but I just think what you
No,
do,
no.
what you do is kind of awesome, and not kind of, it is awesome. And that, the term trauma has been around for a long time. I remember a couple of years ago in the treatment world, well, you must be trauma informed. So people would go to a weekend seminar and get informed, you know?
That's still going around.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
Not properly. I mean, I agree about trauma informed, but there's, you know, a weekend seminar just isn't going to cut it.
Yeah.
But, and you're right. I do work with people based on my experiences. And I think that's because, well, I don't think, I know it's because when I'm working or talking to somebody who has been through something I've been through, or I've been through something they've been through, I get it. And I can relate and understand better and connect better. It's like I couldn't work with, I mean, I could, but I don't work necessarily with drug or alcohol, people who are recovering or addicts, because I've never been through that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily get it,
Well, there's another side to that. Let me interrupt you real quick. I'm sorry, but there's another side of that, which is
No, go ahead.
interesting. And yes, you get it. But what my experience has been, because I used to work with people coming out of jail and prison, and I never did time.
Mm-hmm.
But I've learned over the years is to your point, yes, you get it. But guess what? The person you're talking to gets that you get it.
Yeah.
So that gives them, in my opinion, the person you're trying to help gives them permission to open their heart and trust a little bit. Because what I've learned in my years of helping others, if people don't trust you or they don't trust, no matter what you say to them is going to be kind of kept in a trash can outside until they're ready to bring it in, so to speak. They'll listen to the information, but they may not they may not take a bite, so to speak,
Exactly.
or they may not swallow it, or they may
Yeah.
not accept it or embrace it. They'll kind of like leasing rather than buying something. And when it comes to self-care, you've got to own it. In my opinion, you have to own it, no matter how small or how little it is, or how much time you spend with self-care. It's got to be your self-care. It can't be my self-care that I recommend for you. It's got to be your self-care that works for you.
Right. No, you were absolutely correct. It doesn't work if the people don't trust you.
Right.
They're going to be guarded. They're not going to tell you the truth, or they're not going to tell the complete truth, and it's just not beneficial for anybody.
Yeah, I agree. And you can't fix it an hour a day in session. I mean, an hour a week,
No, you can't.
Come back and see me next week. We'll spend actually 45 minutes is what the professionals actually bill for.
Right.
So it's a tough one. It really is.
It is. Let's talk a little bit about the holidays coming up. I know, you're really looking forward to it. I know a lot of people are really looking forward to it, but I also know a lot of people are dreading it because, the family drama, or, oh my gosh, I'm going to go and I'm going to have to hear all about my past, and they're going to have to, they're going to berate me, and nothing I do is right. And, all that good stuff that comes along with meeting up with the families.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, one of the reasons, that's my opinion, one of the reasons why drug and alcohol abuse, rise during the holidays. It's a way to kind of numb that pain and get through those hard dinners and stuff that we've got coming up. So, what are some tips that you have for, not only the people who are in recovery, but the families of those people?
Well, I think probably the most straightforward thing is to prepare for, and by the way, I got sober during the holidays. I mean, I literally went into treatment during, the 11th of November, and my sober date's the 13th. So I was in treatment for 28 days during the holidays. So the holidays were a very precarious time for me for many, many years. And part of the reason I'm a little more excited about this year is, my kids are doing well. their career paths are where they want them. They haven't settled down yet. We don't have grandkids yet, but, I'm not putting any pressure on them. My wife and I are getting along, which is important. And we're trying to make, decisions by sharing with each other rather than trying to, and I'm an impulsive kind of guy because I do have this disease of addiction, which is a compulsive, obsessive, addictive behavior. So, I'm also seeking help. Plus, during this COVID, I go to 4 meetings a week still in my own recovery through Zoom. So I've really stayed attached, and I've had a couple big events this last couple months. I launched my new book back in May, so it's been a full year. But for families, and I understand exactly what you're talking about. It's like Sally's talking to Jim and they're saying, oh my God, Joey's coming home again. And do you remember last year? So it is dreadfully tough for many families, especially if they've got someone who is experiencing or is actively using or is under the influence of something mood altering or self-medicating. The highest and best suggestions I make for them is prepare for it. Know that you've got a loved one that's going to be coming home, and set some ground rules. And if you find that during this period of time prior to their coming home, if you're talking with them and they're resistant and they're just belligerent about it and they're threatening and they're trying to hold you hostage, like probably they do most of the year, it's okay sometimes, in my opinion, to say, why don't we get together, after Thanksgiving? So instead of you coming into the fold of everybody being there, enjoy yourself. Well, I don't want to do it that way. Well, then there's some things we need to discuss, and you can't really tell a heavy drinker, you can't drink while you're home, because those are trigger words and they're just going to drink secretly. Right. And it's hard to tell someone who does drugs, don't bring your drugs home, because most people that are suffering from self-medication, their conscious mind is telling them this is the only way that I can actually feel good. And so the only way that I can cope with my family and be civil is I have to be high. And, science says, hey, that doesn't work. But that person who's actively using can't change that. They're suffering from this disease. If they had diabetes, we would do everything we could to try to, put the right food on the table, talk about exercise, nutrition being important, maybe not bring high fat foods or sugar related foods in the house if somebody has an eating disorder. Right. It can even hide your liquor. The problem, though, that person that's coming home, they're not going to be different for a minute. If they try to white knuckle it and stop before they get home, they're going to be going through withdrawals, which means they're even going to be more difficult to manage. So what families can do is confront this up front, knowing that this is going to happen, set up plans with other members of the family, because everyone's probably worried about it, and talk about what everyone's going to do if a situation arises. Now, if an individual doesn't know what to do, there's things you can do online. You can find out. You can call me. We can talk about it, take a minute or two, and I can give you some suggestions. And understand that the person you're dealing with is sick. They really are sick. And I find it pretty rare that someone actually acts out and does what they do to hurt others on purpose. It's an accident. Right. They've got this illness. And if you understand that, and look, when I talk to families, most of them, the average has been going through this for 12 to 14 years. So it's hard to say. So look, at the end of the day, for your own self-care, depending upon who who is in your family, I'm referring to, you maybe just have to say, look, this has been a tough year for your dad and I and your sisters or your brothers. And, we would like to invite you to maybe not come home. I mean, just that thought said out loud is going to cause a conversation to take place. And it could be an invitation to have a conversation about what the new rules might look like when you come home. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a tough one, and I, when I tell parents, maybe you have to change the locks, they go, well, I don't want to kick my son out. I said, I'm not talking about kicking him out. Well, if I change the locks, how are they going to get in? I said, well, every time they come in, don't they steal something from you? Well, yes. So maybe changing the locks would be a good thing. And by doing that, you're changing the conversation with your child, which could stimulate a different conversation.
Right. Absolutely.
Little things can make big differences, especially when it comes to somebody who's under the influence of something mood altering, because there is no rationalizing with them. It's just, it's until they remove and are willing to remove the anesthesia, there's really no rationalizing it with them.
Very true. That is so true. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us today. This has been a very informative and just incredible. So I really truly appreciate it. How can our listeners? I know you gave us your phone number, and I'll make sure that we get that on the website. But how can listeners find you online? What's your website?
Website is Your Crisis Coach, spelled as one word.com. Or to make it easy, just Google me. My name's Scott. My middle initials H. Last name is Silverman, Silverman. And again, my phone number is 619-993-2738. And people say, why do you give out your phone numbers? I said, because I'd rather spend 20 minutes or 2 hours talking to somebody than 30 minutes going to a funeral.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree.
And get my book, by the way, on Amazon. The
yes, your book. Yeah. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I meant to ask you about that too.
That's my job, is to bring that up, and I forgot. We were having such a great conversation.
Exactly.
It's called The Opioid Epidemic, and it's got chapters and guidance and navigational tools. It's like a GPS for families who are having issues and stories about families who have lost loved ones to the opioid crisis and other issues. So please take a look. Amazon's got it. You can find it on my website, but just go to Amazon and grab a copy and let me know what you think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And listeners, that I will have all of Scott's information in the show notes. Just go to releasingtraumapodcast.com. If you're listening from one of our partner stations, pull up Scott's episode, all his contact information, links to his book, everything will be there for you. Scott, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been amazing.
Thank you. My pleasure. Appreciate it.
And listeners, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you in the next show.